Okay, so again, I want you to work on a WPA poster. Um, so again, think of the style that we were just looking at. We had the sort of flat colors and things like that. So the other thing I want you to think about is different sizes. So in this case, just like we were doing in the artist statement poster, for the WPA poster, I want you to use a little bit bigger size. Again, you don't have to print this one out like you had to with the artist statement. It's not printing out, but you need to turn it in, and I want to see it bigger than 8.5 by 11. Okay, so how do I make another bigger 8.5 by 11? Again, under the profile, you got print option right here, a print option. Under the print option, you can choose the different size down here. Of course, the legal one or the tabloid one. I think the tabloid was in 11 by 17, right? That might make a nice poster size. So think about making a nice poster size. You can always print it out on your own, even though you don't have to print me one out. You can always print one out and take it home and put it on your wall at your house. And every day you're walking by, you can think of how great a designer you are to pump yourself up a little bit, right? When I was going to school, I would always take the things I did in class and go home and tape them to my wall. Because you always look at them and get better each time, right? You get better. You always get better, 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 better. So think about that. Again, you're going to want to use the CMYK because we're doing printed. Now I know it talked about the raster effect of 300 ppi. That's fine. I'm not really going to rasterize anything, and I'm not going to really use bitmap stuff. I'm just going to hit OK. So again, I have a nice kind of poster feel. Today I wanted to kind of talk about lines with you a little bit. Specifically making lines that have some texture to them. So I'm going to kind of follow the one poster that we were looking at where the deer was kind of running through the woods with the trees. So I'm going to make some trees, okay, using just the pencil tool or the brush tool. And then I'm going to add some effects to it to give it some texture. Most likely the effect I'm going to use is called scribble. Scribble. Or we can use the one, if you saw there was one that had kind of lines to it, okay, there's an effect that does that too. I got to remember which one it is, but it adds lines that go horizontally. So again, I'm going to kind of give myself a trees kind of look here by drawing some lines with just a pencil tool. And I'm going to draw some trees, 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 trees. Make it a little forest here. Okay, there's some trees. Again, I'm just using the pencil tool to give myself some trees. Now, these trees are kind of boring. You got this nice straight lines to them. They're all fun and games, but what would be nice is if you think about a tree, right? It doesn't have straight bark, right? It doesn't have straight bark. So if I select my lines, I want to talk a little bit about adding texture to your lines, some texture to your lines. Inside of Illustrator, again, we've been looking at some of the effects that are underneath here, okay? One of the effects that kind of will make your lines a little bit more interesting would be what was it called, the scatter. Is it called scatter or splatter? No, it's splatter. Scribble. That's the one I was looking for. It was under oh, that's a little bit too much. Let me turn it down a little bit. Oh, that's definitely going way the wrong way here. There we go. There we go. So again, this is kind of what I was looking for, was kind of an effect. Again, this is an interesting effect. It's called scribble. And so if you don't want nice smooth, you want something that has a little bit of a little bit of texture to it, or kind of line action. This one is kind of interesting. It's called Scribble. And basically it's taking your line and kind of scribbling it, if that's a word, scribble. And there's a bunch of different options you can choose. What I'm trying to do is give my line so it's just not so smooth, a little bit of a texture to it. That's all. Oh, a little bit less. Just a little bit. There we go. That way it's just not so straight and strict and things like that. Again, this one is called Scribble. I believe it was located underneath Effects, Stylize, Scribble. It was under Effects, Stylize, and Scribble. So there we go. I have a nice kind of, it doesn't look quite like trees yet, so I'm going to give each tree a nice kind of, maybe a top to it. Let me put some green at the top of my tree here. I'm going to get a little green. The brush I'm going to use is called the Blob Brush Tool. Again, I think I used this last class. The Blob Brush Tool is a great way to give yourself kind of a fat, I don't know if that's the best word, a fat kind of, oh, it's using the background color, it's using the stroke color. There we go. So I'm going to give myself a nice big fat brush, how about 100, and I'm going to kind of put a top to my tree here. There we go. Oh, and it's taking on the scribble effect that I did before. You see that? That's not a very good brush. Hold on. That's pretty ugly. Let me delete that. How about we... I just wanted to give a top to my trees here. Why did it give me a pattern? Oh, I was using the wrong brush. That's why. Blob brush, this one. If you double click on the blob brush, it'll give you different options inside there. Okay. Again, you can adjust the size of the brush. Okay. The size of the brush. And angle of the brush. And you can actually change it so it gives you more of a if you look at it, you can get more of a calligraphy look to it. What a calligraphy, if you ever seen calligraphy pens before, right? The calligraphy pen kind of is fat on one side and thin on the other, so that when you're drawing a letter, it would draw thick in some parts and thin in the other. Again, I double-clicked on the blob brush tool. And again, it's kind of a way of painting like the paintbrush, but what's the difference between the blob brush and the regular paintbrush is that the blob brush will combine all the objects together into one object. And I'll show you what I mean. If I paint now, here we go. This is what I want. Kind of here's my treetop. There's one treetop. There's another treetop. Another treetop. Another treetop. Ooh, that's pretty ugly, isn't it? Okay, but if you look at it, it combined them, if they were next to each other, it combined them together into one big blob. Do you see that? Whereas if you drew with the regular brush tool, okay, and then you drew again with a brush, it'll see these as two separate objects. Right? So what the difference between the blob brush tool and the paintbrush tool is the blob will combine the stuff together. That's basically why it's called a blob, right? Like the blob that comes around. Okay, I don't like these treetops either. I'm fighting with my treetops here. I just want to make a nice sort of canopy. I think that blob was too big. That brush was too big. Let me make a little smaller one. There we go. There we go. There's one tree. There's another tree. There's another tree. Okay, crazy trees. Now if I wanted to fill in my tree, I can do that also using the blob brush tool. If you want, you could fill that in. Or, oops, wrong color. And then I'm going to select all this stuff and move it to the back. There we go. That looks pretty good. And these lines have some problems with them. I need to turn off the fill with these lines. There we go. Still has a little. No. There we go. That's looking a lot better now. So one of the things to keep in mind is that if you've looked at any of the lithography stuff, you know, some of the designs you could come up with here doesn't necessarily have to line up. You can go over, you know, the ink went over a little bit here. It's okay. It's part of the design. Okay, so we went over scribble. We went over the blob brush tool. I might add a little bit of blob here one more time up here. Let me go over that. Suck up that color here. There we go. Very nice forest there. Again, I might add a background. I'm going to add a background, a rectangle. And this might be a nighttime scene. So I'm going to give it a kind of a dark blue and send that to the back. There we go. And then of course my forest here is by a swamp. How about that? We'll put a little stream in there and some grass in there. Again, you can use your blob brush tool. You might want to try that, or you might want to just use your pencil tool like we did before. You put a little water there, and then maybe a little grass in there. Trees like to be in some grass, don't they? There we go. There we go. And let's make this a better looking tool here. Okay. So again, nice flat colors. that are you know, it has a kind of poster look. This probably has a little bit too much color to it, but hey, you know, we want it to look good. Let me shrink some of this stuff down a little bit. I'm going to shrink it just a little bit. There we go. And then, of course, I want to have a little moon in the upper corner up at the top, and then I'm going to have some moonlight come down. And then we can have a little fish inside there. And maybe we should have a little fish. If I could find a fish, I could put it in. If I could draw a fish. So I'm going to put a little moon in the upper corner. Then I'll go over how to do a gradient that actually has some transparency to it. So I'm going to put a little moon in the upper corner here. So let's use our Pathfinder option to make the moon. Let's use a Pathfinder option to make a moon. How I'm going to use the Pathfinder option to make a moon is I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to copy and then paste in place my background color. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both objects, and I'm going to use the Pathfinder option. And since I want just like a little sliver of the moon up here, a little sliver of the moon in the corner of this, I'm going to select both objects. In fact, let me move this down just a little bit so I get a little bit more moon. There we go. I'm going to select both of these objects here, and I'm going to say, not divide, we want to intersect. What does that do? It's going to make an object of where the two paths overlap each other. So I'm going to use the one that's called intersect. And if I click on there, it gives me this little object that's right there. That's what I want, a little moon object. We'll give it a little moon color. There we go. That's a moon. And of course the moon is not just nice and boring like that. It has some nice texture to it. So I was using the Pathfinder option. We've already gone over which one, the unite. We went over minus front. This one was called intersect. So I had a rectangle and I had a circle in the corner here, and I used the intersect, and it made an object where the two objects overlapped right there. And then let's just make some quick, I don't know why my brush is giving me this horrible texture. Why is this brush giving me this horrible texture? Just give me a kind of a little brush option here. Oops, that's not very good. It's the same color. Here we go. And let's not do it black. Let's do it like a darker gray. Right, the moon has some texture to it, right? Maybe it's the man in the moon eye here, right? There he is. It's the man in the moon eye. Just using a brush to add. Now I'm not using a straight brush here. I'm just using a simple brush. And of course, let's put some light colors in there. There we go. There's my moon. I guess we could have... the man in the moon there. So again, we use the overlap. Let me stop this video. Again, I'm going to use the pen tool here, and I'm going to kind of make a shape. Like that. So what I want is a nice kind of soft, subtle glow to come from the moon. And let me say maybe it's highlighting something down here. Maybe it's highlighting something down here. So how can I get a kind of a glow to come from the moon down? Well, in this case, we've already learned how to use gradients before, right? Well, we can do what's called, and I'm going to make this one kind of square here. You can use in a gradient option, you can use transparency. And of course, transparency would be transparent. So a nice way to give yourself a nice kind of glow might be to use the transparency. So if I go to the gradient option, I'm going to give my shape a gradient, and then I'm going to go to the gradient option. Inside the gradient option, you have, of course, you have a color on one side and a color on the other. And let me just give it a kind of a glow of some kind. And then this one, in the far end, is going to be totally transparent. So again, in the gradient option, you have one color on one side and another color on the other side. And in the gradient pop-up window, you can actually use an opacity. See the opacity right here? So if I wanted the moon to kind of shine down on me here, I could put a color on one side, and then on the second color, I'm going to turn the opacity all the way down to 0. Okay, and you can kind of see the glow happening already there. And now I just need to change the angle of the glow. In fact, this one I might not even have 100%. I'm going to start at like 70% or maybe even 60%. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the angle using the gradient tool and kind of just draw a line along. And then, of course, the last thing to do is to kind of put it behind, well, maybe. So you get the idea here. Maybe stretch it a little bit further. And then, of course, let's put it behind the moon here. So I'm going to object arrange, send it back. Oops, not all the way to the back. We don't want to do that. Edit, undo, send it back. Might be easier sometimes to rearrange things in the layers window. If you've never, and I should have probably used more than one layer here. You can see all the layers that I've done. You can drag things around in the layer window. So I want to move this kind of down below the moon here. If I can find my moon here. There it is. You can drag things around. I have a bunch of shapes here. Uh-oh, where did it go? I guess I should give it a name. Oh, here it is. A little bit further more. Yeah, but it has all these little pieces too. I should have organized it a little better. Here we go. Here's the moon shape. There we go. So if you want a nice glow, like you see here, you can simply use a gradient that has a little bit of a transparency to it. There we go. And that's a kind of an easy technique. And you saw that in that one poster that we were looking at earlier. Oops. Whatever, there's my glow. Okay, so last thing I'm going to do is put some type on there, put some letters on there. So let's put some letters on. Let's talk about exaggerating the letters again, exaggerating, and so let's call this one moonshine. And let's make a theater up. Let me save this before it crashes. So let's make some text up here for our poster here. Again, using simple fonts is probably best to use. They didn't have all the great, wonderful fonts we have today back in the 1930s. So let's look for some theater theater font. What would a theater font look like? So one of the things you can do, and I'm going to show you this. I don't like that font. Hold on. Let me find something that's a little bit simpler. That's kind of nice. Okay, so to exaggerate your font, to exaggerate your text, don't be afraid to use the points on your letters. So in this case, if you look, one way to exaggerate this font is like I did before. Do you see how you can scale it like that? Oh, it's all wonderful in scaling. But the problem with that is scaling all the entire letter. One thing you can do is you can use the points. Okay, so if I use the direct selection tool, I can actually, before I do that, I'm going to turn my letters into objects. So I'm going to turn my letters into objects, and by going under type, convert, create outlines. And if I do create outlines, what it'll do is it'll convert it to objects. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all the points along the bottom here, and I'm going to drag them down. If I zoom in here, I'm going to zoom in here. So what I want to do, and let me grab a little bit more. I didn't grab everything I wanted here. Hold on. I don't want these points. There we go. So you can grab points and then scale them like this. Oh, I got the A over here. I didn't want that A. I want this one. So don't be afraid to convert your letters into objects so that you can exaggerate. Oh, I missed. Let me try this again. I'm going to grab all these points down here, and I want to move it down a little bit. There we go. Do you see how I altered the text like that? Did you see that? So converting your letters to objects, you can then have access to the actual points that are along the edge of your letters, which then you can move and manipulate the letters. It's a much different look to the font like this than it would if I just scaled the entire thing. Did you see that? So here is my title to my poster. My title to my poster. And then let's put a little date down there. And of course line that up. And so I'm going to make this line a little thinner on my stroke here. Maybe even thinner than that. Maybe get rid of it. Yeah. What do you guys think? Did I make a good poster in half hour? I'm going to give myself an A+. No? Okay, again, let's review. Blob brush tool. I used a scribble on the lines. I did the Pathfinder where I made a shape. I converted my text to objects so I can exaggerate them. And what else did we do? We reordered a bunch of things. So